So it's a little bit late at night on the East Coast, but on the West Coast it's still about 9:53. So I'm going to try to get this video in before the day's over. No promises though. So this is just sort of off the top of my head. I'm going to do Capitalism, a Love Story, Part 3, and this is going to be about more solutions and what problems I have with them and why. And again, I'll probably use links in the description as I feel necessary. So Moore talks about cooperatives, democracy, the friggin' people, regulations, bottom-up community organization, revolution, rights to basic needs, second Bill of Rights, state control. That's going to be a big thing for me. And so those are all the things I plan to tackle in this video. I apologize for missing a few last time, like the expansion of war and management. The working class taking the fall for the managerial class, but it slipped my mind, and I was focusing on disparity in wealth, evictions from homes, and that kind of stuff. So I apologize about that. I'll try to cover everything in this video. If I don't, I'll probably cut it short and put like part 4.1 or 2 or whatever. But I don't think that'll be necessary. So here we go. So one of the first solutions Moore has is cooperatives. And he cites this place in Chicago, I can't remember which, I think it was a glass making company, and the workers were getting really bad benefits. They weren't really being compensated for the labor they felt, and so they revolted. Not they revolted, but they were all fired basically because the company was going bankrupt. And so months, like a little bit later on, I'm not sure the time frame, you can probably look this up, I can't remember what they were off the top of my head. That's my fault, of course. But he said cooperatives would be a good alternative to the capitalist system. Now I agree, it's actually a good example. I actually agree that it's a good solution, but just like with his other solutions, it's the wrong context, because where he wants cooperatives, where he says he wants democracy in the workplace, he doesn't really want participatory or direct democracy in the workplace, or that's what would happen with cooperatives. But he doesn't really want it on a decentralized and anti-authoritarian basis in the political economy, not just in the monetary economy or not the political arena. And in the economy, apparently he wants alternatives to capitalism, but in the political arena he's completely happy with what's going on. Well, no, he's not, but it's not going to be a big change. It's just changing around the figureheads, and that's not going to do much. It's like changing around the chairs on the Titanic. So it's the good solution, but it's the wrong context, and it's the wrong context because it's a wrong context because the cooperatives should be alternatives to the state in general, and not just state capitalism. State capitalism itself should be opposed as a system, and we should head towards a more voluntary and cooperative system, as well as a competitive one. I'm not against competition. He says democracy. Democracy is in what kind of democracy? Democracy is in the kind of system where we're represented by other people. And I don't think that's the kind of democracy that we should have. I think we should have participatory and direct democracy within voluntary communities that are decentralized, and they're based on free association. You can leave. And I don't think that should be, I think society should be pluralistic, hence why I'm an anarchist, and I think that there should be many different kinds of community organization, or just, there could be more individualistic communities. I'm fine with that too. So I like pluralism, and I think that, direct democracy isn't for everyone, democracy in general isn't for everyone. But it's a form of organization, and I think some anarchists just off-count it as only state-controlled democracy. But I don't really think that's the case, and I think we can learn a lot from direct democracy, participatory economics, and democracy. And while we don't have to necessarily embrace them, I don't think we should throw them away either. So again, good solution, but it's the wrong context, and it's the wrong kind of democracy for me. The friggin' people, that was his next one. Well, the friggin' people are basically indoctrinated by the government that they're in a good system. There's this quote by H.L. Mencken that the good citizen is someone who doesn't question, that always obeys, and they're taught this mainly in the institution like school, where basically they're rounded up like cattle and told, obedience is the highest virtue in society. I've been through the school system for about 13 years of my life. If you count kindergarten, I was taught basically obedience was a virtue. Don't question the status quo. I mean, question it, but don't remove the system, because then you're being utopian. So I mean, I have direct experience with this, and later on in my life, in my junior and senior year, eventually I'll do a video on how I became an anarchist, just as an aside, which I should have done before, but I'll get into that, and probably into atheism too. But it's just that the people are just too indoctrinated by the system to really do anything or to really be relied on, and nor should people be relied on to be the sole arbiter or authority or monopolized authority over other people. If Hobbes was right about the man against man, then government is completely nonsensical. If men were angels, we wouldn't need government. If men were devils, we don't dare have one. Of course, men are neither devils nor angels. I think men are, generally speaking, can be good people, and they can be bad people. There's no necessary, stable definition of what man can be, I guess. No inherent nature. So regulation is always the social democrats, liberals kind of answer to problems. Well, if we have a problem, we just need a regulatory commission. And just like I was talking about, the regulatory commission isn't made out of some benevolent group of people. They're the same people as everybody else. They're going to make mistakes. Central planning doesn't really work. You can look at the Soviet Union for examples of why central planning fails, even in comparison to the central planning that the U.S. government had on during the time of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was still massively failing because of the high levels of state control as opposed to market control. So regulation really hasn't worked, and regulation really can't work because not only is it immoral, forcing people to abide by restrictions, laws, and regulations to the barrel of a gun, but it's highly impractical because most people either disobey the laws or make them meaningless, or they're just corrected by the political class. So his next one was bottom-up community organization, which I thought was a good one, but then he completely defeated the point of that when he started talking about democracy again. And the state is a centralized bureaucracy where top-down hierarchy is the name of the game, and obviously that's not bottom-up community organization. And if we're having bottom-up community organization just to get to top-down hierarchical organization, it seems to completely defeat the point for me. So again, good idea, wrong context for me. Revolution. Moore wants a revolution, but I don't really know what sort of he doesn't really. I don't remember him outlining in detail what sort of revolution, whether it be violent, non-violent, direct action or whatever. So I can't say much about this, but I'm figuring that it's just the friggin' people, the regulatory commission, whatever. And then these are three of the biggest issues that I had with him, and they come in the form of rights of basic needs, Second Bill of Rights, and state control. So we got to discuss, of course, what is a right. A right is basically a legal permission or a legal sanction to be able to do something. So the right to life, liberty, and property means you have a right to live, right to be free, and a right to your property that you justly own. That was originally in the Constitution, but then they put pursuit of happiness because it sounded more eloquent. I don't know. But that's a right, basically, and it's only as real as you make it. Rights don't exist within the context of reality. They only exist as much as people let them exist. So, for example, if you say you don't have a right to be hit by me, and then I hit you, well, obviously that right isn't being well enforced. For an example, so rights to basic needs like electricity, water, medicine, they're like impossible to provide because there's always going to be a supply and demand for them. Private individuals are always going to want, and companies are always going to want to make a profit off this. And there's nothing wrong with making a profit off of giving people what they want or what they need. It just seems highly impractical for the government to provide basic needs like medicine and whatever else that Moore wanted, because the government as it is can't really provide with Medicare, can't provide with workers' comp, can't really provide for basic things as it is. I can't imagine that government would try to monopolize these things. Moore made no sort of assertion that it would be otherwise. But I mean, I have an inclination to think that he might want these things monopolized by the state, and that'll just raise prices. It'll just make longer lines. Same thing with the Soviet Union, although it's not the same exact thing, but it's under the same principle. Second Bill of Rights is something he also talked about. It was something FDR tried to impose, but he died before he could impose it, and apparently Moore thought that would have solved everything. But as I just said, magical pieces of paper like legislation doesn't change the fact that companies are going to want to provide these services, and that the government can't successfully monopolize them anyway. He also wanted state control, and state control, as an anarchist, I found that highly repugnant, because the practicality, morality, and the basic flaws of a state-controlled society come in here. And it's just, you can't force, or you can apparently if you're the state, but morally speaking, you can't force your opinions or your into legislation. You're basically legislating morality and telling people what's wrong and what's right, and you're not really allowing them to have competing ideas of what's right and what's wrong, and people should be able to do that as long as it's peaceful and voluntary. But the government doesn't allow this. It monopolizes the areas and prevents people through taxation and force and the threat of violence to not do something like this. So state control is highly immoral and also impractical, because people will always resist. There will always be a spirit of resistance within society, however small, and it's never going to work. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. There was a huge black market in the Soviet Union. People traded a lot of stuff illegally, and there's a lot of illegal activity now. A lot of people get past the U.S.-Mexican border. And of course, the biggest example of legality and not really having much meaning or state control is prohibition. Prohibition failed utterly, and the war on drugs is failing utterly as well. Trillions of dollars spent on a program that is completely failed in basically every way. So that's about it. Those were all of his solutions, and I didn't really like one of them. Well, I liked a few of them, but they're all within the wrong context, because they're all going towards a more state-controlled society, it seems to me. So those are my problems with Moore. And the next, probably tomorrow if I can, I'll talk about where all these problems stem from and how to kind of solve them. So I think that's about it. Those are the big solutions that he had in the movie.